I never thought I'd hear her voice again. 7 years of silence, and then my phone lit up with a number I'd almost forgotten. The voicemail was short. No hello, no ask about the kids, just my mother's clipped tone. We're getting older. Your father needs surgery. You owe us. I played it 3 times, my hands vibrating against the kitchen counter. James found me there, staring at the sink like it held answers. He didn't have to ask who called. He knew that look. They disowned me the week I turned 18. Not for drugs or dropping out or some teenage rebellion. No, I'd gotten into every college I applied to. The problem was which degree I chose. Law was their religion, and art was blasphemy. I still remember my father slamming his palm on the table. You'd rather starve in a gutter than make something of yourself? They packed my things that night, left them in trash bags on the porch. James and I met in community college. He was studying carpentry. I was waitressing night shifts to afford my art classes. For our wedding rehearsal dinner, we splurged on a taco truck and string lights in his parents' backyard. My parents showed up uninvited. Mom spent an hour berating me for wasting money on a party instead of helping them refinance their house. Dad called James a dead-end laborer to his face. We haven't spoken since. 2 days after the voicemail, and my aunt called. She's the only one who still reaches out, though it's always tense. They're staying with me, she said. They want to meet the girls, says it's time to mend things. The girls are 5 and 7, bright, loud, obsessed with glitter glue and dinosaur documentaries. They don't know they have grandparents. James and I agreed years ago, if we ever broke no contact, no unsupervised visits. He held my hand while I texted my aunt the name of a diner. Meeting them felt like stepping into a cold bath. Mom's hair was thinner, dyed an unnervingly vibrant red. Dad's hands trembled when he lifted his coffee. Small details I shouldn't have noticed. Mom cut straight to it. Freelancing's unstable. What happens if James gets laid off? She eyed my thrift store cardigan like it offended her. Dad slid a piece of paper across the table, itemized medical bills highlighted in yellow. Family takes care of each other, he said. The subtext hung there. You owe us. That night, I found my 7-year-old crying in her bunk bed. She'd overheard my phone call with Aunt Linda, the one where Mom said I was too selfish to care about family. Her words, not mine, lodged in my baby's heart. James suggested therapy, for her or me or both. I froze. My parents used to call therapists glorified snake oil salesmen, and part of me still hears their voices when I consider asking for help. Mom showed up unannounced 3 days later. James was at work, and the girls were at school. She stood on our porch in a pantsuit, like she was attending a board meeting. Your cousin's a terrible liar, she said when I asked how she got our address. She marched past me, inspecting the living room with a realtor's cold efficiency. Stopped at the guest room. This will do. I'll send movers for our things tomorrow. Panic tastes like metal. I said no. Too quiet the first time, louder the second. She laughed, this dry, crackling sound. Who else will take us? You think your aunt wants us? I called Linda right after, my fingers slipping on the phone screen. She sighed. They've burned every bridge, honey. You're their last hope. James found me at 2 a.m., scrubbing the kitchen floor on my hands and knees. It's a habit from high school, this compulsion to clean when the world feels unsteady. He didn't say a word, just knelt beside me, pried the sponge from my raw fingers, and held me until the shaking stopped. By morning, there were 14 voicemails. Dad's voice, each message harsher than the last, threatening to sue for elder abandonment. I played the last one on speaker while James scrambled eggs. The legal term sounded absurd in my father's mouth. He'd never bothered with a lawyer when he kicked me out. Now he's citing statutes demanding we provide adequate care. James cracked eggs harder with each replay. The girls don't know about the threats. They shouldn't have to. But I see the way my oldest lingers near the phone now, how she startles at raised voices in cartoons. I'm supposed to be the shield between them and the world's sharp edges. Part of me still feels 18, trembling in a dorm parking lot with 2 trash bags of clothes and a half-finished sketchbook. That feeling, like I'm begging someone, anyone, to believe I'm worth more than my utility, never really left. But there's another part now, fiercer, that sees my daughter's wide eyes and thinks, not them, never them. James left a contractor's magazine on the counter this morning, open to an ad for home security systems. I know what it means. We'll talk about it tonight, after the girls are asleep. For now, I'm sitting in the guest room they want to claim, tracing the sunlight on the walls we painted lavender last spring. It's not much, but it's ours. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I know what it costs to let them in. Now for the first update. 3 weeks. That's how long it's been since I posted here, and I wish I could say things got better, but they didn't. They got sharper. After I blocked my dad's number, I thought maybe the silence would finally stick. Wrong. He used my uncle's phone to text me. Same cadence, same threats, just a different area code. You have 48 hours to reconsider, or we escalate. James found me sitting on the bathroom floor, phone gripped so tight my knuckles turned white. He didn't ask, just took the phone, read the message, and said, "We're getting a lawyer." The attorney was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with a stack of parenting magazines in her waiting room. Made me wonder if she had kids. She listened to the voicemails, skimmed the texts, then leaned back in her chair. Legally, they've got nothing. Elder abandonment statutes don't work like that. Relief hit me so fast I almost cried. Then she added, "But they could make noise. Call CPS, smear you online. It's messy, not illegal." James squeezed my hand. His palm was rough from work, and I focused on that texture to keep my breathing steady. 2 days later, my 5-year-old brought home a drawing from school. Purple crayon giants with jagged teeth hovering over a stick figure family. Her teacher wrote a note. She said they yell mean things in her dreams. Is everything okay at home? I stared at that question for 10 minutes, maybe longer. How do you explain that the monsters are real and they share your DNA? Mom showed up again while I was at the grocery store. James came home early, thank God, and found her in our office, flipping through our tax files. He told me later she didn't even look up when he walked in. Just said, "You're overspending on utilities," like she had every right to audit our lives. He called the police. Hearing him recount it made my skin crawl. Not because of what she did, but because of how normal it sounded. She left when they said they were sending a unit, he said, rubbing his forehead. But before she went out the door, she turned and he hesitated. She said, "You ruined my life twice. Twice. Once when I chose art over law. Once when I said no to housing them." That's how she measures worth. In debts owed, sacrifices quantified. My aunt called an hour after the cops left. No hello. Just, how dare you humiliate them like that? Her voice shook, and I realized she was scared. Not of me, but for them. "Your mother's not eating," she said. "She sits by the window waiting for you to call." For a second, I almost caved. Then I pictured Mom's fingers on our tax returns, calculating how much she could take. James' parents offered to pay for a security system. His mom said, "We've got some savings," in that quiet way of hers, like she was offering a casserole, not a lifeline. I said no. Not because I didn't want help, but because every favor feels like a chain now. The next blow came via email. My biggest client, a children's book series I'd been illustrating for 3 years, postponed our contract. "Family emergencies," they wrote. I knew before I called. Dad had contacted them, spun some story about me being unreliable. The editor wouldn't say it outright, but her tone was all apology and no action. I cried in the shower so the girls wouldn't hear. Hot water, cold tiles, the kind of sobbing that leaves you hollow. James found me wrapped in a towel, dripping on the bath mat. He didn't say, "It'll be okay," just pulled me close and murmured, "We fight together, always." I wrote the letter that night. Certified mail, no return address. 3 sentences. Do not contact us. Do not ask for money. Do not approach our children. Simple. Final. Dad's response came in a manila envelope. Childhood photos of me, birthday parties, graduations, all the milestones they'd attended before the disowning. Every image had "ungrateful" scrawled across my face in red marker. The last one was my high school art show. They'd circled my first place ribbon and drawn an arrow to it, worthless. I burned them in the backyard fire pit. Watched the flames lick the edges of my 3rd grade smile. Sleep's been a lie lately. My youngest started waking up screaming about shadow people in her closet. I've been camping on her floor, this too small beanbag digging into my ribs, listening to her breathe. One night, she sat up suddenly and said, "Why does Grandma hate you?" Not, "Why doesn't she love us?" but hate. 7 years old, and she already knows the difference. I lied. Told her Grandma's just sad, but she's too smart. She rolled over and muttered, "Sad people shouldn't make kids cry," into her unicorn pillow. Ran into Mrs. Riley last week, my high school art teacher. She was buying turpentine at the craft store. Asked how my work was going. I said, "Great," with this manic grin, like if I pretended hard enough, it'd become true. She nodded, but her eyes dropped to my shaking hands. I shoved them in my pockets. James took a second job, nights and weekends at a hardware store, stocking shelves. He says it's temporary, but I found him asleep at the kitchen table, forehead pressed against an invoice. There's a coffee stain on the corner that matches the shape of Maine. I didn't wake him, just draped my cardigan over his shoulders and stood there, counting his breaths. The Adult Protective Services letter almost broke me. My parents claimed we were neglecting them, withholding care, financial abuse. The investigator came on a Tuesday. She had a rainbow tote bag and asked to see the girls' rooms. Checked the fridge, the pantry, asked my 7-year-old what she had for breakfast. "Eggos and strawberries," my kid said, swinging her legs under the chair. And Daddy forgot the syrup again. The investigator closed her notebook. "You're fine," she said, then, softer. "This happens more than you'd think." Something shifted in me after that. The trembling stopped, not because I'm stronger, but because the fear burned itself out. What's left is this: stillness, cold and clear like winter air. James says it's progress. I don't know. But when I caught my reflection yesterday, standing in line at the post office holding a package of client sketches, I didn't see the girl they left on the porch. I saw someone who survived every kind of fire. They'll probably keep trying. People like my parents don't stop. But I've started sleeping through the night. The girls' drawings are taped over the water stains on the fridge. And that letter I sent, they haven't replied. Maybe silence is the best gift they've ever given me. Now for the second update. 2 months. That's how long it's been since my last update. And if I'm being honest, it feels like 2 years. Time doesn't heal, it just carves deeper grooves. My parents moved into a subsidized senior apartment. My aunt called to tell me, her voice dripping with pity. They're in Unit 4B, she said, like I'd asked. I didn't. James stood at the sink, scrooging a burnt pan from dinner, his shoulders tense. When I hung up, he didn't ask for details, just handed me a dish towel and said, "Your hands are shaking." I hadn't noticed. James's mom paid for a month of house cleaning. We came home to find a stranger vacuuming our couch crumbs. A note on the fridge, no strings, love mom. I left it there for a week, then tossed it, but I didn't cancel the service. Let her think she's helping. Let me pretend it doesn't feel like surrender. My 7-year-old asked the question while we were building a pillow fort. Out of nowhere, her tiny voice cutting through the static. Why don't Nana and Papa love us? I froze, a cushion clutched to my chest. How do you explain narcissism to a second grader? I went with, some people don't know how to love right. She nodded, solemn, then demanded we add more blankets to the castle walls. Kids are resilient, or maybe they just sense when to stop pushing. Dad called James's boss, claimed he'd stolen tools from the construction site. I found out when James came home early, his work boots tracking mud on the carpet. HR cleared me, he said, staring at the wall. But the guys, they've been giving me space. The unspoken hung between us. They don't trust me anymore. He lost the second job 2 weeks later. Budget meetings, they said. I know what that means. We're living off savings now. Our emergency fund was supposed to be for hospital visits, car repairs, not legal threats and lost income. James stopped making eye contact. He takes the trash out 3 times a day, like if he moves enough, he can outrun the guilt. I found my old sketchbook while digging for tax documents. The pages smelled like dorm room dust and charcoal. Flips of my 19-year-old self screaming back. A self-portrait with my hands around my throat, a series called Birthright, where parents devoured their young. I'd forgotten how raw those drawings were, how alive. Mom sent a birthday card for my youngest. Pink envelope, loopy cursive. Inside, a $20 bill and "We miss you," written in the wrong shade of blue. My daughter asked if we could buy more glitter glue. I burned the card in the backyard while they napped. The girls made me a macaroni necklace instead. It hangs on my desk, clattering when I work. My client came back. No apology, just an email with a new deadline and a gif of a dancing cactus. The replacement artist had creative differences. I wanted to rage, to tell them loyalty shouldn't be conditional. Instead, I sent back 3 rough drafts. Passive aggression has its perks. I overheard James on the phone at 3 a.m. "I'm scared she'll never recover from this," he whispered. Our bedroom was dark, but I could see his silhouette against the window, his thumb rubbing circles on his knee, the same nervous tick he's had since our first date. I closed my eyes, feigned sleep. Some truths are too sharp to hold barehanded. Started running at dawn, past the elementary school, the 7-Eleven, their old neighborhood. I don't slow down at the stop sign where Dad once rear-ended a minivan, the one where he blamed the driver for braking too fast. My lungs burn, but it's cleaner than the other things burning. My aunt died, massive heart attack, the obituary said. At the funeral, Mom sat in the front row, black veil clinging to her face. She turned once, just once, as I hovered by the hydrangeas. Her glare could have melted steel. I left before they lowered the casket. Let the dead bury the dead. A box arrived from my aunt's estate. Inside, my baby blanket, a tarnished charm bracelet, and every art school rejection letter from senior year. The ones I'd given my parents to mail. UNC Chapel Hill, RESD, SCAD. All stamped, returned to sender in angry red ink. They'd hidden them. Of course they had. James found me cross-legged on the closet floor, letters fanned around me like a shrine. He didn't speak, just picked one up, read it slow, then disappeared into the garage. Came back with a frame he'd been using for a birdhouse blueprint. Hung the RESD letter next to the fridge. "A reminder," he said, wiping sawdust off the glass, "that you're unbreakable." Dad fell, broke his hip, the nurse said when she called. I'd been listed as his emergency contact. The pen shook in my hand as I filled out the forms. Under relationship to patient, I wrote deceased. The nurse paused. "I'll need a copy of the death certificate." I met her gaze. "Check the paperwork from 2012. That's the year they told the family I was dead to them." She didn't call back. Mom came to Lily's soccer game. I didn't see her at first, too busy cheering as my 7-year-old tripped over the ball. Then a shriek. That's my granddaughter. Cold flooded my veins. The coach, a retired Marine with a handlebar mustache, stepped between us. Ma'am, you're disrupting the game. Mom spat something about rights. He crossed his arms. Your right to leave is what I'm enforcing. That night, I dreamt I was 18 again. Standing in their kitchen, acceptance letter crumpled in my fist. This time, when Dad said, "You'll starve," I didn't cry, just turned and walked. The screen door slammed behind me. I didn't look back. James says I've been sleeping through the night. The macaroni necklace broke last week, scattered across the kitchen tiles. My youngest helped me glue it back together. It's okay, Mama, she said, pressing a crooked piece into place. Broken things can still be pretty. Maybe she's right. Now for the final update, 6 months. That's how long it's been since I last posted, and I guess part of me's still surprised I'm here at all. Not because things are fixed, they're not, but because the weight of it all doesn't crush me anymore. It just sits, like a stone I've learned to carry. The bank foreclosed on my parents' house, found out through Zillow of all things. A notification popped up on my phone. 3-bed ranch, price reduced. There it was, Mom's overgrown hydrangeas, the porch swing Dad never fixed, the living room walls stripped bare. I zoomed in on the realtor's photo until my screen pixelated. No note, no call, just a for sale sign staked into dead grass. James found me like that, thumb hovering over the image. He didn't ask, just kissed my temple and said, "The girls need help with their volcano project." Their apartment complex evicted them a week later. Harassing neighbors, apparently. Dad yelling about stolen mailboxes, Mom leaving Bible verses taped to doors. My uncle called, voice tight. "You happy now? They're sleeping in their car." I hung up mid-rant. Let him rot with the guilt they've fed him for decades. Hired the elder law attorney. Not for them. For us. Turns out Mom had a separate account she'd been stuffing with Dad's pension checks. $42,000. Enough to cover their bills 3 times over. The attorney's office smelled like lemon disinfectant and burnt coffee. When she slid the paperwork across the desk, I laughed. A raw, broken sound. All that screaming. All those threats. And they could have fixed it themselves. Sent them a notarized letter, just the facts. Account numbers, balances, a screenshot of Mom's Applebee's charges from last Christmas Eve. No venom, no closure. You have the means. You chose this. Dropped it in the mailbox and immediately scrubbed my hands raw. Some stains don't wash off. Dad showed up 2 days later, sobbing on the porch, snot dripping into his beard. "I'm proud of you," he choked out. "You've got that artist grit." The door hit his shoulder when I slammed it. Through the peephole, I watched him limp back to his Corolla, back hunched like a question mark. James wrapped his arms around me, forehead pressed to my hair. "You okay?" he murmured. I realized I wasn't shaking, just still. The restraining order came through the same week Mom keyed "family first" into my car door. The judge raised an eyebrow at the photos. Jagged letters cutting through peeling paint. "They ever threaten the children?" he asked. I shook my head. "Just me." He stamped the paper so hard the sound echoed. My client renewed my contract. Turns out the replacement artist ghosted them. Something about a spiritual awakening in Bali. The project manager sent a Zoom invite with the subject line, "Urgent." I waited 3 days to reply. Rates gone up 20%. They agreed in 8 minutes. Used the signing bonus to buy James a new set of DeWalt drills. He cried in the Home Depot parking lot. Quiet, ashamed tears. I held his hand the whole drive home. Mother's Day. The girls made me a card with glitter glue and construction paper. "You're our superhero," it said, with a stick figure me holding a rainbow sword. Taped it right over the framed rejection letter in the kitchen. James joked, "Should have added a cape." My youngest frowned. "Superheroes don't need capes, they've got strong hearts." Out of the mouths of babes. Ran into Dad at Lowe's. Aisle 12, light bulbs. He pretended not to see me, shoulders stiff as he studied a pack of LED watts. I grabbed the soft white 4-pack he'd been eyeing, paid, and left it on his windshield. No note. Let him wonder. Mom's diagnosis came via my cousin's wife. Early-stage dementia. "She keeps forgetting where she put her keys," the text read. "She needs you." I blocked the number. James found me scrubbing baseboards at midnight. "You don't have to forgive," he said, kneeling beside me. "But you can stop punishing yourself." I didn't stop scrubbing. The earrings arrived in a velvet box, Mom's diamond studs from her wedding day, the ones she'd threatened to haunt me over if I ever lost them. Pawn shop gave me $1,300, donated every cent to a community college art fund. The receipt came with a thank you note. "Your gift will help students like you." Irony's a bitter pill, but I swallowed it anyway. My youngest started kindergarten. Backpack bigger than her torso, frozen lunchbox clutched to her chest. Her teacher sent home a drawing that afternoon, our family as stick figures under a purple sun. Me, James, her sister, no one else. I pinned it to the fridge. James traced the crayon outlines. "She's okay," he said. Not a question, a promise. "Tonight the house is quiet." James is snoring on the couch, a documentary about sharks murmuring in the background. The girls are asleep, tomorrow's clothes laid out in neat small piles. And me, I'm at the kitchen table sketching, not for work, not for approval, just because. The pencil feels lighter somehow, the lines don't wobble. Maybe healing isn't a straight line, maybe it's a scribble, messy, overlapping, but yours. All I know is this: when I close my eyes tonight, I won't see their faces. I'll see mine, and it's enough.